So it's been a pretty weird year for Xbox. There's been a lot of questions around the brand and what they have planned for the future. Most of that has been about their exclusive lineup, but also for Xbox Game Pass. There have been some questions with it as well, but I do come bearing great news today for all of you subscribers out there. They confirm some monumental news if everything works as intended, but the news, it doesn't just stop there. No, Xbox Game Pass. They had a pretty big day, and we have a few different Game Pass topics to go over. So do make sure to stay tuned for all of that, but also for an interesting PlayStation update as well, because they're trying to revitalize the PlayStation VR 2 with a rather interesting new feature. This could actually change its future. Let's just go and get right into the video, though. So it's been 4 months since Microsoft completed the acquisition for Activision Blizzard, and, that was a pivotal moment for the Xbox brand. I mean, really, it was just flat out one of the biggest moments in gaming history, period, and now we're all just kind of waiting to see what happens next. What do they have planned together? And, that's kind of been the big problem so far. This has been a much slower integration than what we saw with Bethesda, and unlike the Bethesda acquisition, Xbox never held a roundtable event where they talked to fans specifically about their plans. So there has been a lack of communication when it comes to Activision Blizzard. They're being much more hush-hush this time around, and well, I think a lot of that is because of the ongoing FTC trial. People do kind of forget that that's still a thing. And okay, even if the FTC doesn't have a great case, Microsoft still surely doesn't want to help them, even in the slightest. So I think that's why we're seeing a lot less communication compared to what we saw with the Bethesda buyout. But nonetheless, fans still want answers. And I think especially now with all the speculation that's run rampant over the last few months. So the big two questions that's really on everybody's mind, and this only seems to be growing by the day, is one, about exclusivity. Will Activision Blizzard make any Xbox exclusive titles that, of course, aren't Call of Duty? We all know that's going to be multi-platform. What about other franchises, though, like Crash Bandicoot and Spyro? What is the future for those games? Are they going to be multi-platform, or does Xbox plan to make some games exclusives? That's one question that fans have, and while we don't have an answer for that today, there has, however, been one other question, and that's in regards to Xbox Game Pass. Will they launch their games, including Call of Duty, directly into Game Pass day one? See, the concern that some people have with this is Call of Duty's mega popularity. There have been questions about how viable it is to include Call of Duty day one into Game Pass from a business perspective. And that concern has really only grown amidst all the speculation that we've seen over the last few months. Xbox clearly has changed some of their business plans this year, so there's been a lot of questions and, answers are needed. Well, that's where we got some good news, because Phil Spencer has officially responded to the Game Pass question. This was from an interview with Stephen Totilo. I do highly recommend reading the full article. There's a lot of interesting information in there. But let's go take a look at what he said about Activision Blizzard on Game Pass. Phil said, and I quote, "Our intent is the full portfolio of games from ZeniMax, Activision Blizzard, and Xbox Game Studios will be on Game Pass day one." So, there you go. Their plans, as of this moment, have not changed with Activision Blizzard. Right now, as we stand today, they have every intention to launch all Activision Blizzard games directly into Game Pass day one, including, yes, Call of Duty, which is absolutely massive if they pull that off. Because, in terms of popularity, Call of Duty is a top 3 game every single year, and this really could potentially be the move to put Game Pass over the top. It will be front and center every single time they announce a new Call of Duty game. Suddenly, Game Pass will get a lot more recognition because they're going to give fans an option. Hey, you want to go out and buy this game for $70? You can absolutely do that. Or you can subscribe to us and get this game plus all these other games throughout the year. And that is something that this service needs right now. Something that we have seen over the last few years is that Xbox Game Pass has slowed down in terms of growth. But this could change absolutely everything, and not just because of Call of Duty either. Activision Blizzard has a lot of other popular IP and really just the mass volume of games that Xbox can now launch directly into Game Pass on a yearly basis. That's going to have Game Pass firing on all cylinders. You have to kind of realize what's in Xbox's pipeline and all the different studios that they now have under their umbrella, including Activision Blizzard. It's honestly kind of crazy to think about because, Xbox before all these acquisitions, they had like 6, 7 studios. But now here we are, and technically they have more studios than any of the console makers. So because Xbox has so many resources now, we are getting to that point where a big game could potentially launch into Game Pass on a pretty regular basis, and that's big for a subscription service like this. If they can constantly have something to look forward to, including Call of Duty, yeah, they could start to see some big growth in the future. Speaking of Game Pass, though, like I said, it's been a pretty big day for them. I'm not sure why they did it this way, but, just days after revealing their February lineup, they decided to shadow release a surprise game being Dead Island 2. Yeah, this just kind of came out of nowhere. You can play this right now as we speak. Go and pause the video if you want to. But it was received fairly well, and, this is a big inclusion. This is a game that just released last year, and it's a very recognizable and popular IP. Even better, and this is something that I've always really liked about Game Pass, Dead Island 2 can be played cooperatively. So, if you have some friends who might also have Xbox Game Pass, this is a game that all of you can jump in together and have some fun. I mean, you just gotta love it. If anything, Game Pass knows how to bring the F-U-N, fun. And depending on who you ask, one of the most fun and definitely one of the most surprising games this year has been none other than Palworld. This is another game that is available in Game Pass, and of course, we've all heard about its success. There for a few weeks, it seemed like everybody was talking about this game, and while it seems like some of that conversation has slowed down a bit, its success just keeps on rolling. They did give a new update today, and check this out. Palworld has now reached 25 million players worldwide. Just for comparison's sake, because I know everybody likes to compare it to Pokemon, even though they don't really play the same, but nonetheless, this is actually more players than Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, which I believe is at right around 23 million units. Now, that is sold compared to played, so you got to keep that in mind as well. But nonetheless, this is all just so crazy to me, to see this game come out and just blow up the way that it has. It really kind of feels like this has been a trend since last year when Baldur's Gate 3 first blew up. We've now seen that happen with a few other games. You have Baldur's Gate 3, Palworld, and here lately also Helldivers 2. The thing that I find really interesting about this topic, though, is the common theme with all three of these games. I mean, they're all completely different, and they're in completely different genres, but I do find it interesting how all three of these games grew at a rapid pace, basically through word of mouth. These are not heavily marketed games, and before their release, a lot of people didn't even know what they were, but once their concurrent players started to rise, and people started to share that information on social media, everybody just kind of tuned in. It almost felt like this FOMO type effect. Everybody wanted to be a part of the latest sensation. So I actually kind of find the way Steam does things to be very beneficial, that they make all this information very public. You can see the best-selling games at any point of the day, and you can also see the most played games through Steam database. And those are things that gives these games recognition, and that's when people talk. The power of word of mouth is a very real thing, especially when a game is fun, and that's the other common theme for all three of these games. They're all three very good and fun games, and if you can make that type of game and get that recognition as well, yeah, people are going to come. Either way, big congrats to Palworld on their 25 million players. That's pretty incredible. Okay, so let's go and talk about PlayStation, though. They've had a rather interesting day as well. They are getting a massive exclusive, which we're going to talk about here in just a moment. I'm super hyped for that game. But also, Sony made another statement that has surprised some people in a very good way, and that's for PlayStation VR 2. The launch for PSVR 2 it has not been great. It actually kind of reminds me a lot of the Vita to an extent, and that's a console I love, by the way. It's one of my most cherished consoles, but the reason it reminds me of the Vita is because once it didn't really have that instantaneous success, it almost feels like Sony took a step back. That's something that they did with the Vita as well. I love the Vita, but that wasn't because Sony was supporting it a lot. It was really more because the third parties that were supporting it. And that, I feel like that's something that's happening with PSVR 2 as well. Now, to be fair, PSVR 2 isn't even a year old yet, so that could still change. Maybe Sony does have some more support planned. There are rumors that Asobi is working on a new Astrobot game, and that could theoretically be for VR. Now, personally, I hope it's a traditional game, but, nonetheless, outside of their first-party games, Sony is doing something that could revitalize PlayStation VR. And a very welcome surprise on their PlayStation blog, they They had this to say. Also, we're pleased to share that we are currently testing the ability for PSVR 2 players to access additional games on PC to offer even more game variety in addition to the PSVR 2 titles available through PlayStation 5. We hope to make this support available in 2024, so stay tuned for more updates. Now, this could actually be a huge turnaround for PSVR 2 because the biggest problem that it faces is that it just doesn't have enough games. The technology, it's there. It's an impressive VR headset, but that doesn't really mean a lot when you can't play most VR games. Allowing PC titles, though, that would suddenly change that. That gives them access to a much, much larger library of VR titles. So let's just go and hypothetically say that somebody's on the market to get a VR headset. Well, if they have a good PC and also they have a PS5, well, then PSVR 2 might actually be a better option than the competition because it can play those PSVR 2 exclusives plus all of those PC games as well. So it suddenly becomes more enticing than a lot of the other options on the market. So this really is a fantastic move by Sony. It's very smart, and it really opens the door for them going forward. Though I will say this, I don't think they should necessarily stop there. If they can port their exclusive VR titles to PC, that might be a good idea as well. The thing about VR is that it's not necessarily a huge market. It is niche, so the more players they can expose their games to, the better these games will perform. From their point of view, though, they might not be necessarily looking at that exactly the same. Okay, so we do have one last thing to talk about, and that's Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Of course, they put out their updated demo yesterday. That update supposedly improves the performance mode. I haven't tried it myself. Let me know what you all think about it. But what I do know is that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth remains my most anticipated game of the year, and that's even after getting the release date for Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. I mean, I've said all of this before, but if it's even possible, my hype has just increased that much more because its reviews are out now. I'm thrilled to say that it currently has a 93 overall score on Metacritic with 118 reviews. That actually makes it the second highest reviewed Final Fantasy game ever made, sitting only behind Final Fantasy IX, which has a 94, though that only has 22 reviews. Yeah, there's a lot more critics in modern gaming, but yeah, it's honestly great to hear just how well received Rebirth is. If you don't know this about me, the original game is actually one of my favorite games ever made. I adore Final Fantasy VII, and these remakes, potentially for me, could end up being even better. Final Fantasy VII Remake was a fantastic start. That was only 15% of the total story, but the gameplay time was roughly the same as the entirety of the original Final Fantasy VII because they expanded every single character in meaningful ways. And Rebirth, it's even bigger. It's even more grand. The thing is, these aren't just remakes. They're reimaginings, maybe actually even more than that if certain theories prove true. But you can tell that there was a lot of love and a lot of passion poured into these games, and we're just in for a great ride. Like, this could be one of the best games for the entire generation. I cannot wait to play this game. I can't even describe how excited I am to play it right now. And hopefully, some of you will feel the same way as well. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode. I feel like it's been a pretty good day for gaming, all things considered. But until next time, peace out.